The wind screamed through Dead Man's Gulch, a forgotten scar of earth in the Montana Territory. 1892. Ezra Kane, bone-tired and whiskey-warmed, slumped against the warped bar of the only saloon still standing. Then the door swung open, and she stepped in. A woman like a fever dream, carved from the storm itself. Her name, he'd learned later, was Clara Voss. Her black velvet dress clung to her like a second skin, frayed at the hem, slit high enough to reveal a glimpse of thigh with every step. Snowflakes melted on her bare shoulders, her collarbone gleaming under the lantern's glow, a curve that begged to be traced. Her auburn hair spilled loose, catching the light like embers, and her eyes, green, sharp, unyielding, locked onto Ezra's with a heat that made his breath catch. She leaned against the bar, close enough for him to smell sage and rain on her skin, her lips parted just enough to show a hint of teeth. "Whiskey," she said, voice low, a velvet blade. His fingers twitched, imagining the softness of her wrist, the pulse beneath. But Ezra gripped his glass tighter, jaw set. He'd seen her kind before, trouble wrapped in silk. He tipped his hat, muttered, "Ma'am," and turned away, heart pounding against his ribs. Humanity, not hunger, held him back. Outside a horse screamed, hooves thundering past the saloon. A shout followed, sharp, desperate. "Rider's coming!" The door slammed shut, and Clara's eyes flicked to the window, her hand slipping to the knife at her hip. The saloon erupted into chaos, chairs scraping, men cursing, bottles clinking as hands reached for guns. Ezra stood, his spurs jangling, and pushed through the crowd to the frost-crusted window. 5 riders, shadows in the blizzard, circled the gulch. Bandits, likely, with the law long gone from these parts. Clara was at his side now, her arm brushing his, the warmth of her skin a jolt through his coat. Her breath was quick, her neck flushed beneath that tangle of auburn hair, but her grip on the knife was steady. "You know how to use that?" Ezra asked, nodding at the blade. She smirked, lips curling like a promise. "Better than you handle that pistol, stranger." He snorted, ignoring the heat her words stirred, and checked his revolver. The barkeep, a grizzled man named Hollis, hissed, "They're after her. Heard she's running from something or someone." Ezra glanced at Clara, her posture defiant, her dress catching the light as she shifted, the fabric tight against her hips. "What did you do?" he asked. She met his gaze, unflinching. "Stole something they want back." Before he could press, a girl, maybe 15, wide-eyed in a patched coat, burst through the back door, clutching a burlap sack. "Clara, they're close," she cried. Clara knelt, her movements fluid, the slit in her dress revealing a flash of leg as she pulled the girl close. "Stay low, Lila," she whispered. Ezra's chest tightened. Not at Clara's form, but at the fierce protection in her voice. He stepped forward. "You got a plan?" Clara rose, her shoulder grazing his chest, a fleeting touch that sent a spark through him. "Hide us. One night. That's all I ask." Her eyes held his, daring him to say no. He didn't. If this story of grit and mystery pulls you in, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more tales from the wild frontier. A gunshot cracked through the night, splintering the saloon's silence like a bone snapped clean. Ezra dropped to the floor, pulling Clara and Lila with him, his hand brushing the curve of Clara's waist as they hit the ground. Her dress rode up, a glimpse of ankle exposed, her breath warm and ragged against his ear. He forced his eyes to the window, not her nearness, though his pulse betrayed him. The riders were closer now, their torches cutting through the blizzard like wolves' eyes. "They're here for the sack," Clara whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers as she clutched Lila close. The girl's face was pale, her small hands gripping the burlap sack as if it held her life. Ezra crawled to the bar, his revolver drawn, and peered over the edge. 5 men, bandanas high, dismounted in the snow, their boots crunching with purpose. Hollis, the barkeep, gestured to a trap door behind the counter. "Cellar. Now." Ezra nodded, helping Clara to her feet, her arm sliding against his, her skin soft but taut with resolve. She moved with a grace that didn't belong in this chaos, her velvet dress catching the lamplight, outlining every curve. He looked away, focusing on Lila, who scrambled ahead. The cellar was damp, smelling of earth and stale whiskey, lit only by a single candle stub. Clara knelt beside Lila, her hair falling loose, brushing her neck like a caress. "What's in the sack?" Ezra asked, voice low. Clara's eyes flicked to him, sharp and guarded. "Enough to kill for," she said. Lila whimpered, and Clara's hand, steady but gentle, smoothed the girl's hair. "It's gold," Lila blurted, voice trembling. "From a bank job. Clara took it to keep it from them." Ezra's jaw tightened. He'd seen men die for less. "You're a thief?" he asked Clara, not accusing, just searching. She straightened, her posture defiant, the low neckline of her dress revealing a pulse at her throat. "I'm surviving," she said, "like you." The air between them crackled, her gaze holding his too long, a challenge and a plea. Footsteps thudded above, voices barking orders. Ezra gripped his gun, stepping between them and the trapdoor. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Clara's hand grazed his back as she moved closer, her touch fleeting but electric. He didn't turn. He couldn't. Not when survival demanded focus, and her nearness threatened to unravel it. The trapdoor rattled above, a fist pounding like a hammer on an anvil. Ezra tensed, his revolver cocked, the cold, steel grounding him as Clara's breath brushed his neck, quick and warm. She crouched beside him in the cellar's dim glow, her velvet dress clinging to her thighs, the fabric stretched taut as she shifted to shield Lila. Her green eyes caught the candlelight, fierce and unyielding, but her lips trembled, betraying a fear she wouldn't voice. Ezra's fingers itched to steady her, to trace the line of her jaw, but he gripped the gun tighter, anchoring himself to duty. Lila clung to the burlap sack, its contents, gold, she'd said, making her small frame seem smaller still. "They'll kill us," she whispered, voice breaking. Clara's hand covered the girl's, her touch soft but firm, like a mother's promise. Boots scraped overhead, voices growling through the floorboards. "Find the woman," one barked. Ezra met Clara's gaze, her face close enough to feel the heat of her skin. "Why'd you take it?" he murmured, low enough the words stayed between them. Her lips parted, a fleeting vulnerability in her stare. "To buy a life for her," she said, nodding at Lila. "Not for me." The truth hung heavy, like damp earth in the cellar's air. Ezra nodded, his shoulder brushing hers, an accidental intimacy that sent a jolt through him. He forced his eyes to the trapdoor. A board creaked, too close. Ezra motioned for silence, his hand grazing Clara's arm, her skin warm under his calloused fingers. She didn't flinch, but her breath hitched, a sound that stirred something deep in him. He pulled back, cursing the distraction. The trapdoor flew open and a silhouette loomed, lantern light glinting off a blade. Ezra fired, the shot deafening in the cramped space. The man crumpled, blood pooling on the dirt floor. Clara gasped, her body pressing closer to Ezra's, her curves soft against his side. He didn't move, didn't dare, his focus on the shadows above. "There's more," he whispered. Clara nodded, her hand slipping to her knife, her posture fierce despite the fear in her eyes. Lila whimpered, and Clara pulled her close, whispering, "We're not done yet." Ezra reloaded, the click of the cylinder loud in the sudden quiet. The storm outside roared, but inside, the fight was just beginning. The cellar stairs groaned under heavy boots, a second raider descending, his shadow swallowing the candle's weak glow. Ezra lunged, tackling the man before he could draw, their bodies crashing against the damp earth. Clara's gasp cut through the scuffle, her silhouette rising in the flickering light, the velvet of her dress catching the flame's hue, accentuating the curve of her hips. Her knife gleamed as she stood ready, her breath visible in the cold, lips parted like a silent prayer. Ezra pinned the raider, his fist connecting with jawbone, but his eyes flicked to Clara, her stance fierce, her auburn hair loose and wild. Desire stirred, unbidden, but he shoved it down, focusing on the man's struggling form. "Stay back," he growled to her, voice rough. She didn't. Clara stepped closer, her boot brushing Ezra's knee as she drove her knife into the raider's shoulder, precise and unflinching. The man howled, collapsing. Ezra pushed him aside, catching Clara's wrist to steady her, her pulse racing under his grip, her skin warm and electric. She met his gaze, eyes blazing, the closeness of her body a distraction he couldn't afford. "Your trouble," he muttered, releasing her. Her lips curved, a fleeting, dangerous smile. "You're welcome," she shot back, brushing past him, her shoulder grazing his chest, leaving a spark in its wake. Lila huddled in the corner, clutching the sack, her wide eyes darting between them. "They're still up there," she whispered. Ezra hauled the raider's body into the shadows, his hands shaking, not from fear, but from Clara's nearness. She knelt by Lila, her dress riding up slightly, revealing the soft line of her calf. "We need to move," she said, voice low, her hand smoothing Lila's hair, with a tenderness that twisted something in Ezra's chest. He nodded, peering up the stairs. The saloon above was quiet, too quiet. He led the way, revolver raised, Clara and Lila behind him. Her hand brushed his back as they climbed, a steadying touch that felt too intimate, too right. At the top, the saloon was empty, tables overturned, the storm's howl louder now. A single lantern swung, casting long shadows. Then a voice from outside, low, commanding. "Clara Voss, we know you're here." The sack in Lila's arms felt heavier than ever, and Ezra's grip on his gun tightened. A window shattered, glass spraying across the saloon's floor like jagged stars. Ezra shoved Clara and Lila behind an overturned table, his arm brushing the curve of Clara's shoulder, her warmth seeping through the thin velvet of her dress. Her breath caught, her chest rising sharply, the low neckline revealing a flush that crept up her throat. Her eyes, green and fierce, held his for a moment, a spark of defiance and something softer. Trust, maybe. Ezra forced his gaze away, his heart hammering not just from the danger. "Stay down," he whispered, his voice rougher than he meant. She nodded, her fingers grazing his wrist, a fleeting touch that burned like whiskey. Lila clutched the sack, her knuckles white, her small frame trembling but resolute. Outside, the leader's voice cut through the storm. "Give us the gold, Voss, and we'll let the girl live." Clara's jaw tightened, her lips parting as if to speak, but she bit back the words, her hand resting protectively on Lila's head. Ezra peeked over the table, counting 3 shadows moving through the snow, rifles glinting. He glanced at Clara, her posture tense, the dress clinging to her like a shadow, accentuating every line of her form. He cursed himself for noticing, focusing instead on the plan forming in his mind. "Hollis," he hissed, spotting the barkeep crouched nearby. "Back door. Any chance?" Hollis shook his head, eyes wide. "Blocked. They've got men there." Clara shifted closer, her knee brushing Ezra's as she leaned in, her voice low and urgent. "There's a loft above. Narrow stairs. We could hold them off." Her breath was warm against his ear, her auburn hair brushing his cheek, stirring a heat he pushed down deep. He nodded, helping Lila to her feet, his hand steadying Clara's elbow as they moved. The touch lingered, her skin soft under his calloused fingers, but he let go, leading them to the rickety stairs. In the loft, they crouched among barrels and dusty crates, the air thick with the scent of old hay. Clara's knife was out, her stance ready, the slit in her dress revealing a Gilsani flash of thigh as she braced herself. Ezra positioned himself at the stairs, revolver raised. Below, the door creaked open, boots thudding on the floorboards. A voice called up, cold as the wind. "No more running, Clara." The sack in Lila's arms seemed to pulse with the weight of their survival. A rifle shot tore through the loft's thin wall, splintering wood inches from Ezra's head. He ducked, pulling Clara and Lila down, his arm circling Clara's waist, her velvet dress soft against his skin. Her breath hitched, her body pressed close, the curve of her hip warm under his hand. Her auburn hair brushed his jaw, a fleeting distraction he forced aside, though his pulse raced. Clara's eyes, sharp and green, met his, a silent vow in their depths. "We end this now," she whispered, her voice steady, lips close enough to graze his ear. Ezra nodded, his grip tightening on his revolver, his other hand lingering a moment too long on her arm before he let go. Lila, clutching the sack of gold, looked up, her face pale but fierce. "I'm not scared," she said, voice small but sure. Below, boots stormed the stairs, the raiders' shouts echoing like wolves closing in. Ezra fired twice, dropping the first man before he reached the top. Clara moved like a shadow, her knife flashing, catching another in the thigh as he lunged. Her dress clung to her, outlining every tense muscle, her neck flushed with effort. Ezra grabbed her shoulder, pulling her back as another shot rang out, the bullet grazing his coat. Their eyes locked, her breath warm and quick, a moment of connection amidst the chaos. "Get Lila out," he growled. Clara hesitated, then nodded, her hand brushing his chest, a spark of warmth in the cold. They scrambled to a loose board at the loft's edge, prying it open to reveal the snow-swept night. Clara pushed Lila through first, then followed, her movements fluid, the slit in her dress catching the moonlight. Ezra covered them, firing until his revolver clicked empty. He dove through the gap, landing beside them in the snow. The storm had softened, dawn's first light breaking over the gulch. The remaining raiders shouted, their horses rearing, but Ezra, Clara, and Lila vanished into the trees, the sack heavy in Lila's arms. By a frozen creek, Clara stopped, her breath visible, her figure striking against the pale snow. "We keep the gold," she said. "For her." Ezra met her gaze, seeing not just a thief but a woman fighting for family. He nodded, his hand brushing hers, a quiet promise. The gulch fell silent, the raiders' tracks buried by fresh snow. 3 figures moved forward, not blood, but bound by survival. If this tale of courage and heart stirred you, like, share, and subscribe for more. Love doesn't ride alone.